Plato's allegory of the cave begins with a striking and unsettling image. A group of prisoners shackled in a dark cave, facing a wall, unable to move. They are trapped, not just physically, but mentally. Their reality is confined to the narrow view of the shadows dancing on the wall before them. These shadows are all they know. Each prisoner is convinced that these fleeting images represent the world, that they are the truth. In the darkness of the cave, they have no idea that a larger, brighter world exists outside their limited perception. This allegory, simple in its depiction, carries profound implications about the nature of reality, knowledge, and human consciousness. When Plato first presents this image, it is easy to think of the prisoners as primitive beings, confined to a past era. But the allegory is far from merely a historical or cultural commentary. Instead, it touches on something deeply human, our own experience of the world and how limited that experience can be. These prisoners represent all of us, to varying degrees, bound by the confines of our senses, our biases, and our society. Plato's cave is not just a metaphor for ancient ignorance, it is a metaphor for the human condition, transcending time and place. The prisoners in the cave are not just physically imprisoned, their minds are shackled as well. They are denied access to the broader spectrum of reality because they are only able to perceive the shadows projected on the wall in front of them. These shadows, cast by figures behind them and illuminated by a fire, represent the sensory world, the realm of appearances, the world that we see, hear, and touch. But as Plato shows us through the allegory, sensory perception is unreliable. It doesn't give us access to the true essence of things. Our senses distort reality. What we see, what we hear, what we feel may seem real, but it is often far from the truth. The shadows on the wall represent perceptions that we mistake for reality. The prisoners don't question what they see, because they have no other frame of reference. They have never seen anything else. They live within the constraints of a world that appears real, but in fact, is a poor imitation of the real world. This is Plato's powerful insight. Most of us live in a world of illusions. We might be quick to dismiss this idea as outdated or too abstract, but let's think about it in terms of our own lives. How many times have we relied on our senses to tell us what is true, only to later realize that our senses were deceiving us? Whether it's the way we see ourselves in the mirror, the way we judge others based on first impressions, or the way we are swayed by advertisements and social media, we are constantly influenced by a world of superficial appearances. We can be certain that something is true, based on the way it looks or feels, but it is often only when we take a step back and question these perceptions that we discover a deeper, more complex reality. Plato's allegory speaks to that experience. We are often imprisoned by our own perceptions. The shadows on the wall symbolize the distorted, incomplete version of reality that most people live in. The prisoners in the cave cannot turn around. They cannot see the figures or objects casting the shadows. This speaks to the way in which we, too, often have a limited perspective on the world. We only see part of the picture, and because we don't have access to the full story, we assume that what we do see is all there is. Plato challenges us to think about this. How often do we base our judgments on incomplete information? How often do we settle for what is immediately available to us, even though there may be more to the story? Take, for example, the way many of us are raised in society. We are taught to view success in terms of material wealth, career status, and external recognition. From a young age, we are conditioned to see these things as markers of success and happiness. Society tells us what we should value, what we should strive for, and what constitutes a good life. But Plato's allegory invites us to ask, is this really the truth? Are we, like the prisoners in the cave, basing our lives on shadows, on ideas and ideals that are projected by others, but that may not truly represent the best way to live? In fact, the prisoners don't even know that there's another way to live. They are so immersed in their perception of reality that they don't realize they are living in ignorance. They don't question the shadows because they have nothing else to compare them to. Similarly, many of us are so absorbed in the everyday hustle, the rush to achieve, to gain, to appear successful, that we rarely step back and question the values and assumptions that shape our lives. We are, in a sense, Like those prisoners in the cave, so used to the shadows that we take them for the only reality. The question Plato's allegory raises is this: how do we move beyond the shadows and perceive the world as it truly is? The answer, according to Plato, is to embark on a journey of enlightenment, to move from the darkness of ignorance to the light of knowledge. This journey, as the allegory shows, is not easy. In fact, it is painful, but it is also necessary. Plato believed that to understand the true nature of reality, we must challenge our assumptions, our senses, and our preconceived ideas about the world. The freed prisoner, when he finally escapes the cave and sees the world outside, is momentarily blinded by the light of the sun. He experiences disorientation, confusion, and even pain. Plato uses this moment to show that enlightenment, gaining true knowledge, is not an easy or comfortable process. It requires self-examination and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths. The pain the prisoner feels when stepping into the light represents the mental and emotional discomfort that often accompanies personal growth and intellectual awakening. It's only after time, and with some effort, that he begins to adjust to the overwhelming brightness of the world outside. He begins to understand that the reality he once thought was true, the shadows on the wall, was not the whole truth. What he sees now, in the light, is more real, more complete, and more complex than anything he had imagined before. This awakening is not just an intellectual process. It is also deeply emotional. The freed prisoner is transformed by the knowledge he gains. He doesn't just see the world in a new way. He begins to feel it differently. This speaks to the way in which true knowledge doesn't just change our thoughts, it changes our experience of life. Plato's allegory is not just about intellectual enlightenment. It is about a deep transformation that affects every aspect of the self. However, the allegory doesn't end with the prisoner's liberation. He returns to the cave to help free the others, only to find that they resist him. They reject the truth he offers and mock him for his newfound understanding. This part of the allegory reveals another uncomfortable truth. Those who have access to greater knowledge often face hostility from those who are still trapped in ignorance. The freed prisoner's efforts to share his enlightenment are met with skepticism, fear, and even hostility. Plato suggests that this is often the fate of those who seek to challenge the status quo, to break free from the societal shadows and question the established norms. The prisoners who remain in the cave are not just unaware of the world outside. They are also afraid of it. They are so entrenched in their limited view of reality that they cannot accept the possibility that there is something beyond the shadows. This highlights the human tendency to resist change, especially when the change challenges deeply held beliefs and assumptions. We often prefer the comfort of ignorance to the discomfort of self-examination and transformation. The allegory underscores the psychological resistance to truth and the fear of confronting a reality that might be fundamentally different from what we have always known. Yet, Plato's allegory also serves as a call to action. It challenges us to look beyond the shadows in our own lives and to seek the truth, no matter how uncomfortable or disorienting it might be. It encourages us to question the world around us, to reflect on the values and beliefs we hold, and to be brave enough to challenge them when necessary. The path to enlightenment is not easy, but it is the only way to move beyond the limitations of the sensory world and to experience a deeper, more meaningful reality. In a world filled with distractions, superficialities, and illusions, Plato's allegory of the cave is a reminder that there is more to life than what meets the eye. It calls us to embark on the journey of self-discovery, to seek the truth even when it is uncomfortable, and to break free from the chains of ignorance that bind us. Only then can we begin to understand the world as it truly is, not as a series of fleeting shadows, but as a rich, complex reality, full of depth and possibility. In Plato's allegory of the cave, the most striking and transformative moment occurs when one of the prisoners is freed and exposed to the light outside the cave. For the prisoner, this sudden exposure to the sunlight symbolizes a painful yet necessary awakening. Plato does not offer a soft landing for the freed individual. Instead, he portrays this transition as one of suffering, disorientation, and confusion. The light of the sun blinds him at first, and the new world outside the cave overwhelms his senses. It's a visceral, almost traumatic experience that speaks directly to the nature of enlightenment. Truth is rarely gentle. In fact, it's often excruciating. This moment of awakening is key not only in the allegory but in Plato's broader philosophy. Plato understood that the process of moving from ignorance to wisdom is far from straightforward. It requires an upheaval of the self, a complete reconfiguration of one's understanding of the world. The pain felt by the freed prisoner reflects the profound dissonance that comes with seeing the world differently. This is not just a metaphor for intellectual awakening, but for the emotional and psychological turmoil that often accompanies it. The prisoner, for the first time, is forced to confront the limitations of his previous world, the cave of ignorance. In the dark, the prisoners have no choice but to accept the shadows on the wall as reality. They have no reason to question the distorted images they see. These shadows are their entire universe, their whole truth. But when one of them is freed and steps out into the sunlight, the first sensation is pain. The light of the sun, which is a symbol of knowledge and understanding, is too much for him to handle. His eyes, accustomed to the dark, are unable to process the brightness of the world outside. This powerful image represents a central theme in Plato's thought: the discomfort of transformation. It's a kind of intellectual and emotional dissonance that many of us can relate to, even if we don't live in literal caves. When we confront new ideas or challenge our long-held beliefs, the truth often feels jarring, harsh, and even unwelcome. The idea of change, of seeing the world in a way we have never seen it before, can provoke feelings of vulnerability, alienation, and doubt. It is easy to feel that we are losing something familiar when we are forced to re-examine our deeply ingrained beliefs. In this light, the freed prisoner's painful adjustment to the sunlight is an apt metaphor for the intellectual discomfort that accompanies the awakening to truth. There is a broader message here about the nature of human understanding. Our senses, which we trust so much, can only give us a limited view of reality. We see shadows on the wall, and we believe them to be the whole of existence. The process of moving beyond that, of recognizing the limitations of our sensory perception, is painful because it forces us to confront how much we've been deceived. The light outside the cave represents the unvarnished truth, the hard reality of the world, and it's often too much to bear. Plato's metaphor suggests that ignorance is comfortable, and when we are forced to confront the reality beyond our comfortable illusions, we may feel as though we are being blinded. But this discomfort is necessary. The pain of enlightenment is part of the process of growth. Plato does not romanticize knowledge or make it sound easy. In fact, he highlights the difficulty of breaking free from the chains of ignorance, showing how overwhelming the truth can be. It's as if the person who steps into the light must go through a kind of rebirth, a painful process of shedding old ways of thinking in favor of new, more accurate perceptions of the world. Think about it. How often do we change our minds about something we've held dear for years? Whether it's our political beliefs, our cultural assumptions, or even our personal relationships, change requires a significant shift in perspective, and that shift is rarely painless. In fact, discomfort is often the sign that we are growing, that we are leaving behind an old self and adopting a new one. The intellectual discomfort that the freed prisoner experiences, his inability to process the sunlight, his confusion about the world outside, reflects the emotional and intellectual disorientation we often feel when we encounter a truth that challenges everything we thought we knew. The emotional turmoil that comes with the pursuit of truth is perhaps one of the most human aspects of the allegory. When the freed prisoner is exposed to the outside world, he sees the beauty and the richness of life that he had never even imagined. But the initial shock is not just physical, it is psychological. The freed prisoner's discomfort is a reminder that enlightenment doesn't happen overnight. It's a gradual process. As he begins to adjust to the brightness of the sun, he starts to see the world clearly, but only slowly. At first, he can only make out shapes and forms, and only after time does he begin to truly comprehend the world around him. This process mirrors the way intellectual and emotional growth works in real life. We often encounter new ideas that seem overwhelming or intimidating at first, but over time, as we grow and adjust, those ideas begin to make sense. The same is true with personal transformation. We may first resist change because it challenges the very foundation of our identity. But as we process and adjust, we begin to see the wisdom of change and the clarity that comes with it. Plato's allegory suggests that the initial pain of truth eventually gives way to a deeper understanding of reality, a reality that is more vibrant, more complex, and more true than the simplistic shadows of ignorance. But the journey of awakening does not end when the prisoner begins to comprehend the outside world. The next stage, which is perhaps even more difficult, is the return to the cave. The freed prisoner, now equipped with the knowledge and understanding of the outside world, feels compelled to return to his fellow prisoners to share the truth. But this is where the real difficulty of enlightenment becomes clear. The prisoners who remain in the cave are not only ignorant of the world outside, they are hostile to it. They refuse to believe the freed prisoner's claims because it challenges their very understanding of reality. The freed prisoner's attempt to share the truth is met with mockery, rejection, and even violence. This part of the allegory highlights the psychological resistance to change that exists not only in the individual but also in society. Plato's message here is clear. The truth is not always welcomed, and those who seek to share it often face opposition. Just as the prisoners in the cave reject the truth that the freed prisoner offers, so too do many of us resist or dismiss ideas that threaten our worldview. It's easier to remain in the comfort of ignorance than to confront a truth that could shatter our sense of security. The freed prisoner's return to the cave and his rejection by the other prisoners serves as a metaphor for the way society often resists new ideas, especially when those ideas challenge long-held beliefs or established power structures. This resistance to truth is not limited to individuals. It often reflects the broader cultural and societal dynamics at play. Think about history. How many thinkers, revolutionaries, or visionaries have been persecuted for their beliefs? Whether it's Galileo, who challenged the geocentric view of the universe, or Socrates, who questioned the very foundations of Athenian society. History is filled with examples of individuals who sought to illuminate the truth and were met with violence or rejection. Plato's allegory reminds us that the path to enlightenment, both on an individual and societal level, is not smooth. The process of enlightenment is fraught with resistance, and those who are brave enough to pursue it may face isolation, misunderstanding, or even hostility. Yet, despite the pain and opposition, the allegory ultimately on the importance of seeking the truth. No matter how difficult it may be, the freed prisoner's journey represents the sacrifice and the courage required to break free from the chains of ignorance. The truth is not easy to attain, and even harder to share, but it is worth it. Plato's philosophical message is profound. Only by confronting the pain of truth can we achieve real understanding. The pursuit of truth is not a comfortable journey, but it is the only journey that leads to genuine wisdom and enlightenment. In the allegory of the cave, Plato presents a profound exploration of human perception and the nature of knowledge. The journey of the freed prisoner, who gradually comes to understand the world beyond the cave, serves as a metaphor for the philosophical pursuit of truth. This journey mirrors the process of enlightenment, the movement from ignorance to knowledge, from shadows to reality, and from partial truths to an understanding of the absolute. The transition from seeing mere reflections to gazing directly at the sun represents the intellectual and spiritual awakening that comes with achieving a deeper understanding of reality. At first, the freed prisoner can only see reflections in the water, unable to comprehend the full picture of the world around him. These reflections are symbols of partial truths, shadows of reality that we often mistake for the whole. In our daily lives, we operate in much the same way. Our understanding of the world is shaped by superficial impressions, often filtered through societal norms, cultural expectations, and personal biases. This stage represents the beginning of intellectual growth, where we start to question the surface-level images and assumptions we've been fed throughout our lives. However, just as the prisoner's eyes are still adjusting to the light, we too are still in the early stages of seeing the world for what it truly is. As the freed prisoner's vision improves, he begins to see objects directly. No longer are these just hazy reflections, but real objects with substance and form. In the world of philosophy, this represents the shift from perceptions and opinions to knowledge. We start to see things more clearly, not merely as they appear but in their true essence. This is where the power of reason and reflection comes into play. Plato believes that true knowledge cannot be based solely on appearances, but must be the product of deep inquiry, critical thinking, and intellectual discipline. Just as the prisoner moves from reflections to actual objects, so too does a thinker move from shallow assumptions to deeper truths. At this point in the allegory, the prisoner has begun to uncover a more accurate understanding of the world. However, Plato doesn't allow him to rest in this newfound clarity. The final stage of the journey is the most significant. The prisoner is able to gaze directly at the sun. For Plato, the sun represents the form of the good, which is the ultimate source of truth and knowledge. The sun is not merely a physical object in the sky, but a symbol of the highest reality, the source of all truth. To look directly at the sun is to look at the essence of existence itself, to perceive the very foundation of all things. Plato's metaphysical philosophy is grounded in this concept of the forms, which are perfect, unchanging, and eternal. The physical world, in contrast, is an imperfect and transient reflection of these forms. This progression from reflections to objects to the sun mirrors the philosophical journey of human beings. Our initial understanding of the world is often based on surface-level impressions, appearances, and subjective experiences. As we grow intellectually, we begin to question these initial assumptions and seek a deeper understanding of the world. This process is gradual and requires effort. The path from ignorance to wisdom is not a straightforward one, but a slow and sometimes painful unfolding of deeper truths. As the prisoner adjusts to the light, his understanding becomes more refined, more complete. This gradual progression is crucial to understanding Plato's view of knowledge. Knowledge is not a sudden revelation or a singular event. It is a process of becoming. It is the result of careful reflection, study, and the willingness to accept that our previous perceptions may have been flawed. In Plato's framework, the physical world that we interact with is imperfect and transient. Our senses, sight, sound, taste are limited, and they often deceive us. The objects we see around us are not the final truth. They are merely imperfect copies of the true forms, which exist beyond our sensory experience. The sun, as the source of light, represents the ultimate truth, the form of the good, the source of all knowledge and understanding. Plato's philosophy suggests that the ultimate goal of knowledge is not to understand the physical world as it appears, but to perceive the eternal truths that underlie all things. This idea of the forms is one of the most significant aspects of Plato's philosophy. According to Plato, the physical world is in constant flux, and everything in it is subject to change and decay. However, the forms, the ideal versions of concepts like beauty, justice, and goodness, are eternal, unchanging, and perfect. They represent the perfect truths that exist behind the imperfect, changing world we perceive. The physical world, then, is only a shadow or reflection of these deeper, unchanging truths. The freed prisoner's journey, moving from the shadows on the wall to the direct gaze at the sun, reflects the philosopher's pursuit of the forms, the search for truth beyond the superficial and transient world of appearances. But what does it mean to see the world in this philosophical sense? To Plato, true seeing is not merely a physical act. It is an intellectual and spiritual one. When we look at the world around us, we may see objects, colors, and shapes, but we may not understand their deeper significance or true nature. True vision, in the Platonic sense, involves understanding the eternal truths behind those objects. Just as the freed prisoner's eyes gradually adjust to the light and then come to perceive the sun, the philosopher's mind must gradually adjust to the light of truth and then come to perceive the forms. The true philosopher, according to Plato, is one who does not simply accept appearances at face value, but seeks to understand the underlying nature of reality. This process of coming to know the world is progressive. The initial steps are often filled with confusion and difficulty. When we begin questioning our long-held beliefs, it can feel like we are stepping out of the cave and into a blinding light. Just as the freed prisoner cannot immediately gaze at the sun, we cannot immediately comprehend the deepest truths about the world. We must go through stages of learning, reflecting, and refining our understanding before we can fully grasp the nature of things. The journey toward knowledge is a gradual one, requiring time, effort, and patience. But why is this journey toward knowledge so important? Plato suggests that knowledge is not just an intellectual pursuit, but a transformative one. To understand the world and the truths behind it is to align oneself with the ultimate source of goodness and wisdom. The sun, as the symbol of the form of the good, represents the highest state of being and understanding that is not only intellectual but also moral and spiritual. In the same way that the prisoner's eyes gradually adjust to the light of the sun, the philosopher's soul is gradually transformed by the pursuit of truth. This process of intellectual transformation is critical for personal growth and societal progress. As individuals come to understand the deeper truths of the world, they are better equipped to contribute to the common good. Plato believed that the philosopher, having seen the truth, has a duty to return to the cave and help others see the light. The journey toward knowledge is not simply for personal gain, but for the betterment of society as a whole. In this sense, the allegory of the cave is not just a metaphor for individual enlightenment, but also a call to social responsibility. Plato's allegory ultimately asks us, as individuals, to reflect on how we see the world. Are we content with the shadows on the wall, or are we willing to step out of the cave and face the harsh light of truth? Are we ready to confront the discomfort of realizing that our previous understanding of reality was incomplete or flawed? The journey from ignorance to knowledge, from shadows to sunlight, is a difficult and often painful one. But it is only by going through this process, by confronting the limitations of our senses and moving toward a deeper understanding, that we can attain the true knowledge of the world. The sun, representing the form of the good, is the ultimate goal of this intellectual journey, and it is only by following the path toward it that we can achieve a genuine understanding of reality. The question, then, is not just about whether we can see the world clearly, it's about how we see it. Are we willing to go beyond superficial appearances, to question what we think we know, and to seek out the deeper truths that lie beneath? The journey toward knowledge, as Plato shows us, is not an easy one, but it is a journey worth undertaking. Through it, we not only come to understand the world more fully, but also come to understand ourselves more deeply. One of the most striking elements of Plato's allegory of the cave is the reaction of the other prisoners when the freed individual returns to the cave. After experiencing the world outside and learning what true reality looks like, the freed prisoner, full of newfound knowledge, tries to enlighten the others who remain shackled in the darkness of the cave. However, instead of accepting his insights, they not only reject them but also become hostile toward him. The prisoners see him as foolish, even dangerous, for questioning the very beliefs that have shaped their reality. Plato's depiction of this hostility toward knowledge is an incredibly powerful commentary on human nature, societal dynamics, and the inherent fear of truth. It's a theme that resonates deeply in both ancient and modern contexts, highlighting the emotional and intellectual barriers that prevent people from embracing uncomfortable truths. The reaction of the prisoners in the cave points to a profound truth about human psychology. People are often deeply resistant to change, especially when it challenges their existing worldview. As long as they remain in the dark, they feel secure. The world they see, even though it is a mere shadow of the truth, is familiar and predictable, which offers them a certain sense of comfort. To leave the cave, to step into the light, is to confront not only new ideas, but also the deep-seated uncertainties and fears that accompany the unknown. The fear of the unfamiliar can be so intense that it prevents individuals from even considering that there might be a reality outside the one they've always known. This fear of truth is a central theme in Plato's allegory, and it's one that speaks directly to the human condition. In Plato's view, most people live their lives in a state of ignorance, not because they lack the intellectual capacity to understand the truth, but because they are unwilling to face it. It's not merely that the prisoners are unaware of the light outside the cave, they actively resist the idea of it. They are so accustomed to their lives in darkness, so wedded to the shadows on the wall, that the thought of stepping into the light seems absurd or even dangerous. To embrace the truth would mean questioning the very foundations of their existence, and that is a terrifying prospect for many. The freed prisoner's experience, his painful journey from ignorance to knowledge, is mirrored by the struggles faced by anyone who dares to challenge the status quo. In a very real sense, Plato is commenting on the nature of society's relationship to knowledge. Just as the prisoners resist the freed individuals' attempts to enlighten them, societies often resist the individuals who seek to reveal uncomfortable truths. This resistance is not merely intellectual but emotional and social. People cling to their established beliefs and systems because those beliefs give them a sense of security and belonging. To question these beliefs, to entertain the possibility that they might be wrong, is to risk the destabilization of the entire social fabric. Plato's critique of society goes beyond merely highlighting human fear of truth. He is also pointing out the moral and psychological dimensions of this resistance. The prisoners are not just rejecting an abstract idea, they are rejecting their very concept of reality. In this sense, their refusal to accept the freed prisoner's insights is a form of self-preservation. They are not just protecting their worldview, they are protecting themselves from the emotional, psychological, and existential upheaval that would come with recognizing that their understanding of reality has been fundamentally flawed. This fear of the truth is tied to the vulnerability that comes with self-awareness. For many, ignorance feels like a shield, a way to avoid confronting the deeper questions about life, existence, and meaning. The hostility toward the freed prisoner can also be seen as a reflection of society's fear of change. In the allegory, the prisoners are not just rejecting the freed prisoner's personal journey, they are rejecting the possibility of transformation itself. They are comfortable in their chains, and the thought of breaking free from them is, for them, a terrifying one. Plato is suggesting that this fear of change is a pervasive force in human life. It's not just about accepting new information. It's about confronting the unknown and the uncomfortable, which requires vulnerability and courage. It's no wonder, then, that people resist truth when it challenges the security of their established beliefs and structures. This dynamic between the freed prisoner and the others in the cave also speaks to the isolated nature of those who seek knowledge and truth. The freed prisoner, having discovered the truth outside the cave, now occupies a space that the others cannot even begin to understand. He has seen something that has radically altered his perception of reality, but in trying to convey this truth to others, he finds himself alienated. The hostility he faces is not just a rejection of his message, but a rejection of the very possibility that the world could be different from what the prisoners have always known. In a sense, the freed prisoner's knowledge becomes a burden. He is caught between two worlds, unable to return to the ignorance of the cave, but unable to fully share his insights with those still trapped inside. This theme of alienation is central to the philosopher's experience, as Plato himself demonstrates through the figure of Socrates. Socrates was famous for his questioning, for his willingness to challenge the prevailing beliefs of Athenian society. But this willingness to question, to seek deeper truths, ultimately led to his condemnation and execution. Socrates was put to death not because he had committed any crime, but because his ideas disturbed the status quo. His challenge to the traditional views on justice, virtue, and knowledge was perceived as a threat to the social and political order. In this sense, the philosopher's pursuit of truth is often at odds with society's desire for stability and tradition. Philosophers, like the freed prisoner, are often viewed as disruptive, dangerous, and even foolish by those who prefer to remain in the dark, clinging to their illusions. In today's world, we can see similar patterns of resistance to truth and knowledge. Whether in politics, science, or culture, there are countless examples of people rejecting facts and evidence because they conflict with their existing beliefs or ideologies. Climate change, for instance, is a scientific fact supported by overwhelming evidence, yet many people continue to deny its existence because acknowledging it would force them to confront uncomfortable truths about the future of the planet. Similarly, in the realm of social issues, progress often meets resistance from those who feel threatened by change. Whether it's the push for racial equality, gender rights, or economic justice, There are always those who resist the truth because it challenges their power, their privilege, or their worldview. This resistance to truth is also linked to the fear of responsibility. When the freed prisoner returns to the cave, he is not only confronting the prisoners with a new understanding of reality, he is also confronting them with a moral responsibility. If they acknowledge the truth he offers, they will have to change. They will have to reconsider their lives, their actions, and their role in the world. Change, particularly when it involves confronting uncomfortable truths, requires responsibility, and responsibility can be daunting. It's easier, after all, to remain in the cave, where everything is familiar, than to step out into the light and face the challenge of transformation. This is the heart of Plato's critique. In the Allegory, the freed prisoner is not just rejected for his knowledge. He is feared because his knowledge implies a challenge to the very foundation of the prisoner's existence. The truth, as Plato sees it, is not just an abstract concept, it is a force that can transform lives, societies, and civilizations. But transformation, especially on such a grand scale, is rarely welcomed. People, communities, and even nations can be deeply resistant to the very truths that could set them free. Ultimately, the hostility toward the freed prisoner reveals a deep truth about human nature. We fear what we do not understand, and we resist change because it requires us to confront our vulnerabilities. The truth can be uncomfortable, destabilizing, and even painful, but as Plato's Allegory suggests, it is only by facing the truth, however difficult it may be, that we can achieve true enlightenment. The freed prisoner's journey is a metaphor for the philosopher's journey, a journey that requires not only the courage to seek knowledge, but also the resilience to face the hostility and rejection that often come with challenging the status quo. The struggle for truth is a struggle against the darkness of ignorance. And while the light can be blinding, it is only in the light that we can see the world for what it truly is. The hero's journey and the quest for truth in Plato's Allegory of the Cave. The story of the freed prisoner in Plato's Allegory of the Cave is more than a simple philosophical metaphor. It is a profound narrative that mirrors the age-old archetype of the hero's journey. This narrative structure, as explored by philosopher Joseph Campbell, is a powerful tool for understanding how individuals undergo transformation, confront adversity, and seek enlightenment. Through Campbell's lens, the allegory takes on a deeper resonance, drawing parallels between the freed prisoner's journey and the universal journey of the hero, a figure who ventures into unknown realms, faces trials, and returns transformed, only to confront rejection and hostility from those left behind in ignorance. The hero's journey is a framework that transcends cultures and epochs, found in myths, religious stories, and epics from every corner of the globe. It typically unfolds in three primary stages: departure, initiation, and return. These stages map perfectly onto the trajectory of the freed prisoner in the cave, who, by escaping the darkness of ignorance and stepping into the painful light of truth, undergoes a transformation that challenges not only his understanding of reality, but also his place within his society. The journey of the freed prisoner, when viewed through the lens of Campbell's model, becomes a timeless story about the individual's quest for truth and the often painful consequences of revealing that truth to others who are not yet ready to see it. The first stage of the hero's journey is departure, where the hero leaves behind the world he knows and ventures into the unknown. In Plato's Allegory, this corresponds to the moment when the prisoner is freed from his chains and made to turn his gaze away from the shadows on the cave wall. At first, this departure is literal. The prisoner physically leaves the cave, stepping into the blinding light of the sun. But on a symbolic level, this moment marks the beginning of a profound intellectual and spiritual transformation. The cave, with its shadows and illusions, represents the comfort of ignorance, the familiar and the known, while the world outside the cave symbolizes the realm of enlightenment, the unknown, and the painful truth. The prisoner's departure is not an easy one. Plato highlights the difficulty of this transition, the physical pain and disorientation caused by the intense light of the sun. This initial discomfort mirrors the emotional and intellectual strain that often accompanies the search for truth. To step outside the cave is to challenge long-held beliefs and confront a reality that is vastly different from the limited and distorted perceptions that have shaped the prisoner's entire life. The hero's departure from the cave is akin to the first step a person takes when they question the world they know. When they choose to seek knowledge, even though it may lead them into uncharted territory, the journey toward enlightenment often begins with a disorienting shock, where what was once comfortable and familiar becomes unsettling. But the departure is also an act of courage. The freed prisoner is stepping into a new realm of understanding, and in doing so, he faces an existential challenge. To leave the cave is to let go of one's illusions. To admit that what was once perceived as truth may have been a lie. This can be a deeply unsettling experience for anyone, as it forces them to reconsider their very existence and the foundations of their worldview. The journey into the unknown is always fraught with uncertainty, and the hero must be willing to face the discomfort of the unfamiliar in order to move forward. Initiation, the struggle for understanding. The second stage of the hero's journey is initiation, where the hero faces a series of trials and experiences that lead to a deeper understanding of the world and themselves. In Plato's Allegory, this stage is represented by the freed prisoner's gradual adjustment to the light and the slow process of understanding the true nature of reality. Initially, the light is blinding, and the prisoner can only look at reflections in the water. Over time, as his eyes adjust, he is able to see objects directly. This process symbolizes the gradual attainment of knowledge, where initial insights are partial and fragmented. But over time, through study, reflection, and reasoning, they coalesce into a more complete and profound understanding of the world. The painful process of adjustment to the light highlights the challenges inherent in the pursuit of truth. Knowledge is not something that can be gained instantly. It is a gradual, sometimes painful, process of discovery. Plato's allegory suggests that enlightenment requires a transformation of both the mind and the soul. The freed prisoner must not only overcome the physical discomfort of the light, but also wrestle with the emotional and intellectual challenges that come with understanding a reality that contradicts everything he has ever known. This initiation process, which includes moments of confusion and disillusionment, mirrors the experiences of any individual who embarks on a journey of personal growth and self-discovery, whether through education, spiritual awakening, or the experience of hardship. True understanding often requires the individual to grapple with complex, uncomfortable truths. In this stage, the hero is tested, and the struggle for understanding becomes a central part of the transformation. The journey is not just about acquiring knowledge, but about the development of wisdom, seeing the world not as it appears, but as it truly is. For the freed prisoner, the culmination of this initiation is the realization of the form of the good, which represents the highest form of knowledge in Plato's philosophy. The good is the source of all truth, and the prisoner's eventual ability to look directly at the sun symbolizes his attainment of ultimate understanding. However, this understanding is not easily obtained. It requires patience, perseverance, and a willingness to endure hardship in order to achieve clarity. The initiation is not a smooth or linear process. It is a journey filled with moments of doubt, pain, and struggle. Yet, it is through these trials that the hero ultimately gains the wisdom to see the world in a new light. The final stage of the hero's journey is return, in which the hero returns to the ordinary world, now transformed, to share his newfound knowledge with others. However, the return is not always a joyous or straightforward one. In many myths and stories, the hero is met with resistance, hostility, or even punishment upon returning. This is certainly true in the case of the freed prisoner in the cave. After experiencing the light and coming to understand the true nature of reality, the freed prisoner returns to the cave to share his knowledge with the others. But rather than embracing his insights, the other prisoners reject him. They view him as a fool, someone who has been corrupted by the outside world. In some cases, they even threaten to kill him if he tries to release them from their chains. This moment of rejection highlights one of the most powerful aspects of the hero's journey: the difficulty of sharing knowledge with those who are not ready to receive it. In both Plato's Allegory and in countless myths, The hero's return to the ordinary world is met with hostility because the world is not ready to hear the truth. The other prisoners in the cave, still trapped in their ignorance, cannot comprehend the world the freed prisoner has discovered. Their rejection of him is not just an emotional response, it is a defense mechanism. The truth that the freed prisoner brings threatens to shatter their reality, and so they resist it out of fear, not understanding that accepting the truth could ultimately free them from their shackles. This rejection of knowledge is a theme that runs throughout many ancient myths and religious stories, such as the myth of Prometheus, who defies the gods to bring fire, a symbol of knowledge and enlightenment, to humanity. Like the freed prisoner, Prometheus faces punishment for his actions. His gift of fire, meant to benefit humanity, is met with betrayal and punishment. In both the allegory and the myth, the hero faces the paradox of knowing more than others, yet being unable to convince them of the truth. This theme speaks to a fundamental aspect of human nature, the reluctance to change and the fear of confronting uncomfortable truths. Those who have not yet undergone their own journey of initiation are often unwilling to accept or even consider the knowledge that the hero brings. The universality of the hero's journey is one of the reasons why Plato's allegory resonates so deeply. The stages of departure, initiation, and return are not confined to any single culture or historical moment. They appear across time and space, in myths, legends, and religious stories from around the world. The story of the freed prisoner's journey in Plato's allegory reflects the core of the human experience, the search for truth, the pain of transformation, and the often lonely and difficult task of sharing knowledge with others. The allegory also highlights the ways in which knowledge can be both liberating and isolating. Just as the hero faces resistance from those who are not ready to hear the truth, so too must individuals in real life confront the challenges of communicating difficult truths to a world that may not want to listen. Ultimately, Plato's allegory is not just about the philosophical journey toward truth, but about the broader human experience of growth, change, and enlightenment. The journey from ignorance to knowledge is not an easy one. It is filled with pain, resistance, and rejection, but it is also the only path to true freedom. The allegory of the cave, when viewed through the lens of the hero's journey, becomes a powerful narrative about the quest for truth, the challenges of enlightenment, and the courage required to share that truth with others, even when faced with hostility and rejection. The freed prisoner's journey is the journey of every seeker of wisdom, and it is one that, despite the hardships, is ultimately worth undertaking. In Plato's allegory of the cave, the central question that emerges is not merely how we come to perceive reality, but why we should ever question our understanding of it in the first place. Why should we move beyond the surface level of appearances? And why, in the face of comfort and certainty, should we risk the discomfort that comes with challenging our beliefs? Plato's allegory offers an answer to this question. We must question our understanding of reality because failure to do so risks trapping us in a life of illusion, confined to a shadowy existence devoid of genuine knowledge and understanding. The philosopher Socrates famously said, "The unexamined life is not worth living." And Plato's allegory extends this sentiment by urging us to embark on a journey of self-examination, critical thought, and intellectual liberation. This challenge is particularly poignant today, in a world that increasingly promotes the idea of surface-level engagement over deeper reflection. As a society, we often find ourselves content with quick answers, easy solutions, and shallow understandings. Yet, the allegory calls for a deeper, more rigorous examination of the life we lead and the world we inhabit. To merely accept the appearances around us is to resign ourselves to the shadows on the wall of the cave, the fleeting, imperfect reflections of reality that are often mistaken for the truth. The challenge, as Plato outlines, is not simply to escape the cave, but to recognize that we are in the cave in the first place, to question what we take for granted, and to break free from the intellectual and spiritual chains that hold us captive in a limited view of the world. In the allegory, the prisoners are bound in such a way that they can only see the shadows cast on the wall in front of them, shadows which are created by objects behind them illuminated by the fire. For the prisoners, These shadows are not mere representations, they are the only reality they know. Their entire lives are spent in this confined space, staring at the shifting, distorted images of reality. To them, these shadows are the truth. They have never known a world outside the cave, and so they accept the shadows as the only possible reality. The cave, in this sense, becomes a metaphor for the narrow, limited understanding that most people have about the world. The central message here is that appearances are often deceiving. What we see, what we are told, and what we experience in our daily lives can all be distortions of the underlying truth. The shadows on the wall represent not just the limitations of perception, but the ways in which society shapes our understanding of what is real. In a way, the prisoners in the cave are not so different from us. In our modern world, we are constantly bombarded by media, advertisements, social expectations, and the opinions of others, forces that create their own shadows on the wall of our minds. These external pressures shape the way we view ourselves, our desires, and our place in the world. The allegory thus calls attention to the nature of illusion, how easily we can become comfortable in our limited perceptions, accepting what we are shown without questioning its accuracy or underlying meaning. The prisoners are not evil, nor are they malicious. They are simply ignorant of a deeper truth. They are not intentionally deceived, but rather, they have never had the opportunity to explore beyond the confines of their immediate surroundings. This is, in many ways, a reflection of the human condition. We are often so deeply embedded in our ways of thinking that we fail to see the full scope of reality. We accept the world as it is presented to us, without challenging the assumptions that underlie our beliefs. It is only through active questioning, intellectual curiosity, and the pursuit of knowledge that we can escape the illusions that hold us captive. Plato's allegory also serves as a critique of society itself, particularly the ways in which social structures perpetuate falsehoods and limit intellectual freedom. Just as the prisoners in the cave are chained and forced to see only the shadows, so too are individuals in society often chained by the norms, values, and expectations that are handed down to them. These societal constructs shape the way we perceive reality, often leading us to adopt beliefs and desires that are not our own, but the product of external forces. Consider, for example, the desire for wealth, fame, or social status, things that are often portrayed as markers of success in modern society. For many, these desires become the focal point of their lives, the very definition of success and happiness. However, Plato's allegory suggests that these desires, like the shadows on the wall of the cave, are mere illusions. They are external reflections of values imposed by society, rather than expressions of the true nature of the self. The pursuit of wealth and status, in this sense, becomes an exercise in chasing shadows, constantly striving for something that will never bring fulfillment or enlightenment. The allegory calls into question the source of these societal values. Where do our definitions of success, beauty, love, and happiness come from? Who decides what is real and worthy in our lives? In the modern world, many of these definitions are shaped by the media, by advertisements, by influencers, and by cultural norms that dictate what we should want and how we should behave. The problem with this is not necessarily the pursuit of wealth or fame in itself, but the unquestioned way in which these goals are adopted. If we are not careful, we risk becoming like the prisoners in the cave, mistaking these societal definitions for the truth and, in doing so, missing the opportunity to discover a deeper and more meaningful reality. Plato's allegory urges us to look beyond the surface and ask, what is truly important in life? What is the nature of the good life? Are we living authentically? Or are we simply playing along with the illusions created by those around us? The message here is not to reject societal values outright, but to recognize that these values need to be questioned, examined, and understood in the context of a deeper search for truth. Without self-examination and the pursuit of knowledge, we risk becoming trapped in the shadows of our own making. In his famous statement, "The unexamined life is not worth living," Socrates emphasizes the importance of self-examination. For Plato, This self-examination is the key to escaping the cave of ignorance and discovering a higher truth. The prisoners in the cave are not inherently bad or flawed. They are simply ignorant. They have never questioned their reality, and as a result, they are stuck in an unexamined life. The task of philosophy, then, is to help individuals break free from this intellectual and spiritual imprisonment by encouraging them to examine their lives and the world around them more critically. Self-examination involves questioning the assumptions that we take for granted, the things we believe to be true, without ever truly considering why. It involves looking beyond the superficial and digging deeper into the reasons behind our actions, beliefs, and desires. For instance, why do we seek material possessions or status? What drives our ambitions? What are the underlying assumptions about success, happiness, and fulfillment that guide our behavior? These are questions that require us to move beyond the shadows on the wall and to confront the deeper truths about ourselves. This process is not easy, and it is often uncomfortable. Just as the freed prisoner in the allegory experiences pain when exposed to the blinding light of truth, so too does the person who engages in self-examination face discomfort and disillusionment. The world may seem less certain, and the beliefs we once held dear may be called into question. However, it is only by confronting these uncomfortable truths that we can achieve genuine freedom. The prisoner's escape from the cave symbolizes the process of intellectual and spiritual liberation, the ability to see the world as it truly is, rather than as it appears through the lens of illusion. Moreover, the self-examination encouraged by Plato's allegory is not a solitary endeavor. Just as the freed prisoner returns to the cave to help others see the truth, so too is the journey of self-examination a communal one. Philosophy is not just an individual pursuit. It is a process of engaging with others, challenging one another, and working together to uncover deeper truths about the world. The pursuit of wisdom is a shared endeavor, and it is only through dialogue and collective reflection that we can break free from the illusions that bind us. At its core, Plato's allegory of the cave is a call to seek higher knowledge, to look beyond the shadows, and to understand the true nature of reality. The prisoners in the cave live in a world of limited understanding, shaped entirely by the shadows they see on the wall. However, there is a greater reality outside the cave, a world of truth and enlightenment that awaits those brave enough to seek it. The sun, which represents the form of the good, is the source of all knowledge and understanding. It is only by stepping out of the cave and exposing oneself to the light of the sun that the prisoner can begin to understand the deeper truths of existence. This pursuit of higher knowledge is not just an intellectual exercise. It is a journey toward a more meaningful and authentic life. The shadows on the wall may represent superficial desires and illusions, but the light of the sun represents a deeper, more profound sense of fulfillment and understanding. To question our reality is to search for this higher knowledge, to understand the true nature of what is good, just, and true. It is a quest for wisdom that transcends the fleeting distractions of the material world and aims towards something eternal, unchanging, and deeply meaningful. Plato's allegory challenges us to examine our lives, to question our assumptions, and to seek knowledge beyond appearances. The prisoners in the cave are not bad people. They are simply trapped in a limited understanding of reality. The real challenge is not just to escape the cave, but to understand why we are in the cave in the first place, and to begin the long and often difficult journey toward enlightenment. Through self-examination, philosophical inquiry, and a willingness to confront uncomfortable truths, we can begin to see the world as it truly is and, in doing so, lead more authentic and fulfilling lives. The pursuit of knowledge is not easy, but it is the only path to freedom. In the conclusion of Plato's allegory of the cave, we encounter not just an abstract philosophical concept, but a profound meditation on the human condition and the transformative power of enlightenment. The allegory speaks to us about the nature of knowledge, the philosopher's essential role in society, and the immense personal and societal challenges that accompany the pursuit of truth. It offers a vision of transformation, one that is fraught with discomfort, pain, and resistance, but is ultimately necessary for genuine intellectual and spiritual freedom. Plato's allegory isn't just a story about enlightenment. It's a roadmap for how individuals and societies might achieve a deeper understanding of reality if they are willing to embark on the arduous journey of transformation. This journey, as depicted in the allegory, requires the individual to move beyond superficial appearances, to confront uncomfortable truths, and to engage in the difficult work of self-examination and philosophical inquiry. It asks us to challenge not just the external world, but our own perceptions, beliefs, and desires. Through this process, we are called to break free from the chains of ignorance that bind us, and to embrace the hard-won knowledge that leads to wisdom. At its heart, the allegory of the cave is a metaphor for personal transformation. The journey of the freed prisoner reflects the inner transformation that occurs when we confront the truth, and it underscores how this process can be both liberating and painful. The freed prisoner's initial discomfort in the light of the outside world symbolizes the disorienting and often painful experience of coming to terms with a new, more complex understanding of reality. Just as the prisoner is temporarily blinded by the light, the seeker of wisdom often finds their prior notions of the world shattered and their intellectual certainties upended. The truth is not always pleasant, and the path to wisdom is often a road fraught with existential discomfort and confusion. But the prisoner's gradual adaptation to the light, and their eventual understanding of the world beyond the cave, also symbolizes the process of growth and intellectual maturity. The process of transformation, although initially painful, is essential for the development of true wisdom. This idea that the quest for knowledge is a journey that requires patience, persistence, and self-reflection is central not only to Plato's philosophy, but also to the broader human experience. It is a reminder that the pursuit of truth is not for the faint of heart. It demands courage and resilience, as well as a willingness to confront the unknown and the uncomfortable. The allegory also draws our attention to the specific role of the philosopher in this transformation. The freed prisoner who returns to the cave to share his newfound knowledge is the embodiment of the philosopher in Plato's worldview. For Plato, the philosopher is not someone who seeks truth for personal gain or pleasure, but someone who dedicates themselves to uncovering deeper truths for the benefit of all. The philosopher, as depicted in the allegory, has a duty to share their knowledge with others, even though doing so may be met with resistance, misunderstanding, or outright hostility. When the freed prisoner returns to the cave and attempts to enlighten the others, he faces immediate rejection. The other prisoners, still shackled in the darkness, are unable to comprehend the truth he tries to present. To them, the shadows on the wall are their reality, and anything that challenges this is seen as a threat. They mock the freed prisoner, and in some versions of the allegory, they even become hostile, refusing to believe that there is a reality outside the cave. Plato uses this powerful moment to illustrate the difficult position that philosophers often find themselves in. The philosopher is, in many ways, an outsider, someone who sees beyond the illusions that others are content to accept as truth. But because their insights are so far removed from the conventional wisdom of society, philosophers often face scorn or even persecution. This resistance to truth is not just a theoretical idea. It has been a recurring theme throughout history. Philosophers, scientists, and thinkers who have dared to question the status quo or challenge deeply ingrained beliefs have often found themselves marginalized or punished. Socrates, for instance, was condemned to death for questioning the moral and religious norms of his time. In modern society, dissenting voices that challenge political or cultural conventions are often met with skepticism or hostility. The allegory, then, is not merely an abstract philosophical argument about knowledge. It is a reflection of the very real challenges faced by those who seek to question reality and bring about change. The freed prisoner's return to the cave is symbolic of the philosopher's ongoing mission to seek truth, even when it is met with rejection or indifference. Yet, the allegory also teaches us that despite the hostility and resistance, the philosopher's duty is to continue the work of enlightenment. The freed prisoner does not give up on the others in the cave, even though they do not understand his message. In the same way, the philosopher must persist in seeking and sharing knowledge, not because they expect immediate approval or understanding, but because the pursuit of truth is valuable in and of itself. The allegory teaches us that the search for wisdom is not a solitary endeavor, but a collective one. The philosopher's insights, when shared, have the potential to bring about transformation in others. Just as the freed prisoner's return to the cave holds the possibility of liberation for the other prisoners, so too does the philosopher's work of questioning and enlightening others offer the chance for collective growth and understanding. However, the journey toward enlightenment is not an easy one, and the allegory emphasizes that the pain of transformation is an integral part of the process. The freed prisoner's discomfort in the light of the sun is a powerful metaphor for the existential discomfort that comes with discovering the truth. The process of awakening to reality is often painful because it challenges our most deeply held beliefs, shatters the illusions we have relied upon, and forces us to confront the limits of our knowledge. This discomfort is something that many of us experience on our own personal journeys, whether it's realizing that the world is more complex than we previously thought, or coming to terms with the limitations of our own understanding. The path to wisdom often requires us to face uncomfortable truths. As the freed prisoner learns to see the world in a new way, he also begins to understand the nature of the shadows on the wall and the way in which they distort the truth. This understanding is both liberating and painful, as it forces the individual to let go of previously held illusions. The allegory highlights that the discomfort of confronting truth is not limited to intellectual or philosophical matters alone. It extends to our emotional and spiritual lives as well. The journey of self-examination and enlightenment forces us to question our desires, motivations, and relationships. It forces us to confront our own weaknesses and limitations, and to accept that many of the things we have held dear may be mere illusions or distractions. This process is not just about acquiring knowledge, but about transforming the way we live and the way we see the world. True enlightenment involves a deep, existential change, one that requires both intellectual growth and emotional resilience. It's important to recognize that the pain of transformation does not last forever. Just as the freed prisoner eventually adjusts to the light and comes to see the world in a new way, so too does the seeker of truth eventually find peace in their newfound understanding. The road to enlightenment may be filled with discomfort and confusion, but it also holds the promise of greater clarity, fulfillment, and freedom. As the freed prisoner's journey shows, the process of transformation, though painful, is ultimately worth the effort. The reward is not just a clearer view of the world, but a deeper connection to reality itself. Finally, Plato's allegory teaches us that the journey of transformation is not an individual endeavor alone. While the freed prisoner undergoes a personal transformation, his mission is not complete until he returns to the cave to share his knowledge with others. This return to the cave reflects the collective nature of the journey toward truth. The search for wisdom is not only for the benefit of the individual, but for society as a whole. The true philosopher, according to Plato, is not content to hoard their knowledge for themselves. They seek to bring others into the light, to share the fruits of their intellectual labor with the larger community. In a broader sense, the allegory suggests that the pursuit of wisdom is not a solitary task. It is a collective endeavor that requires cooperation, dialogue, and mutual support. The philosopher's role is to help guide others along the path of enlightenment, to share their insights and wisdom in the hope that others may also be freed from the chains of ignorance. This idea is central to Plato's vision of the philosopher king, the ideal ruler who is not only knowledgeable, but also dedicated to the welfare of the community. The allegory implies that the transformation of the individual is linked to the transformation of society, and that both are necessary for the achievement of true enlightenment. Thus, Plato's allegory of the cave ultimately presents us with a vision of collective progress, where the journey of enlightenment is shared by all. While the path to knowledge is difficult and fraught with challenges, it is also a journey that, when pursued collectively, can lead to a deeper understanding of ourselves and the world around us. The allegory calls us to move beyond the shadows, to question the illusions that shape our lives, and to embrace the difficult, transformative work of seeking wisdom. Only by doing so, Plato suggests, can we hope to achieve true freedom. both as individuals and as a society. The journey is long, the path is hard, but the destination is worth it. Plato's Allegory of the Cave is not just a philosophical thought experiment. It is a timeless guide to self-transformation and societal progress. It calls us to question our understanding of reality, to embrace discomfort in the pursuit of truth, and to break free from the chains of ignorance that hold us back. The question is, will you take the journey towards enlightenment, even if it means stepping out of your comfort zone and challenging what you have always believed? The road may be difficult, but as Plato and other philosophers show us, it is the only path worth walking.